And so on the other hand, regarding Tibetan politics, when I was little, we had a regent who had the authority over the Tibetan governance, and then because of not being honest with the common people, at that time Tata Rinpoche was the regent, and at that time the one subject from the Pala estate, one of the aristocrats, Pala, there was a legal case against this subject of the Pala estate, and this common person, common man, has come to Potala, and then during that hearing in Potala, there was some kind of a hole on the roof of where this legal proceeding was going on, and the sweepers in Potala used to listen through the walls, and then they were also peeping through the holes that were on this roof. And one of the sweepers called me, and I just creeped over there, and I sneaked in, and then I looked down, peeped down from the hole that was in the ceiling, on the side of the ceiling. And so, although the legal proceeding was going on, and then the defendant was making his point, but then instead of listening to what he had to say, the regent was actually scolding him without listening to him. And then I felt that if we have no honesty in this kind of proceedings, then it's really bad. So even at that time, as a child, I had thought that the Tibetan governance of where one person has the authority of both over the temporal and spiritual authority is not really a good system. So after I was enthroned, then I started a reform committee. And so because the previous system was rather biased, I started a petition department, a separate department for petitioning and then the UTOC UTOC was overseeing that proceeding. And one time, one of the defendants went to the residence of UTOC, and after taking the bribe from this defendant, then UTOC called this person in the proceeding room and called him in and said, yesterday you came to me with your bribe, and UTOC said to him that this case cannot be decided just because you bribed me. I have to see who has the truth, and I cannot decide your case on the basis of this bribe, and so take this back. And so this made some news at that time, that UTOC was being honest with the people. And so this is something, some kind of innovation at that time that I made, the reform committee. And then after coming to exile in the 60s, I started the democratic system of governance for Tibetans. And so Tibetans also say that, our democracy is actually a gift from His Holiness. So in the last 10 years, we had elected leadership. The Kalun Tiba has been elected by the people themselves, and it's not something that I had an involvement as making decision. So from that time onwards, since we had the elected leadership, the temporal, there has been change in the governance of Tibetan administration by a single person with both the temporal and spiritual authority. So since then, 10 years have passed. And now, in order to have a full democracy, democratic system, without the rule of some kind of religious teacher or kings and queens, we have to follow the trend of the free world, which is that of democratic system. For example, India, of course, it has huge population, lots of problems, and there are many different languages. Eastern Indians, Southern Indians, Western, Northern have many their own different religion and culture. But still, India as a whole remains very stable as a democratic country. Whereas in China, the authorities have to spend so much money on security. It's not that the money that they spend on internal security is more than exceeds that of the defense budget. The Communist Party is supposed to be for the welfare of the people. And so if the authorities, the leaders are elected by the people, then it would be good, meaningful. Whereas if the authorities have to keep power at the barrel of the gun, then it's not really good. So I feel that it's not good that I, as the Dalai Lama, keep the power, the ultimate absolute power over the spiritual and temporal and spiritual. So during the first 4 Dalai Lamas, the Dalai Lamas didn't have any temporal responsibility, whereas this started since the 5th Dalai Lama. Now we are in the 21st century. Now it is the right time to make changes now. Of course, change will happen eventually, but if it were to happen through pressure from people, then I think that it would be a disgrace to the Dalai Lamas as well. Since the 5th Dalai Lama, Ngawang Gyatso, the Dalai Lamas took this responsibility of temporal and spiritual responsibility of the Tibetan nation. And so I am the 14th Dalai Lama. Now, with pride and happily, if I end this rule of the Dalai Lamas, it would be great. No one can make this decision for me, but I can do it. And therefore, if we have a political leader who is elected by the people, who can take this responsibility of the Tibetan governance, political side, then it would be very good. So if it remained like now, then when I'm no more there, here, then it would be like something is not completed. So as for me, maybe I could boast about it. I have done quite a deal for the Tibetan cause, and Tibetans inside Tibet are trusting me, and the exiled Tibetans also are trusting me, and then there are many other people around the world who trust me, and so at such a time, if I leave this temporal power of over the Tibetan government or administration and return to the original status that I had during the Dalai Lamas had during the first 4 Dalai Lamas. The first Dalai Lama was even called an ecumenical master of the yellow hat. Although the second Dalai Lama was called that, so if I could also return to that kind of status of holding the religious authority, then I could work more for the promotion of human values and also to promote religious harmony in the world, in which fields I have made some contribution, of course. And so I get many invitations from different people in different societies, universities and so forth. They're not asking me to come to teach Buddhism as such, but how to promote these values, human values of compassion and so forth. So people are happy to listen to me, the Dalai Lama. So when I am in such a position, in such a scenario, when I can end this rule of the political rule or authority of the Dalai Lama, it would be a great, a graceful one. So if usually when we have some kind of a function, we say, oh, now we have come to the end, and we have we are actually concluding this in a victorious manner or something like that. So similarly, if I can also change the status of taking the responsibility of the political affairs of Tibet rather victoriously, it would be good. Nobody else can do this, but I can do it. I, who hold this status of a political leader of the Tibetan people, who is in line of the Dalai Lamas. So I also get calls from Tibet saying that the people have heard that I'm going to leave the political power and authority, and therefore people are rather worried that they would be left without anyone to look for. And so they don't have to worry. So the Godin Potang was started during the second Dalai Lama, Gendin Gyatso, during which he didn't have any kind of temporal or political authority. So I am also thinking that if I could live as a religious leader, perhaps I may not be a disgrace to people. And if people could also agree, then I could return to that kind of status. So we are following a very democratic system of governance, and people also have, and people could also see this fact, and And on the other hand, Chinese say that we have no problem. Tibet, there's no such thing as Tibetan issue, but the issue is Dalai Lama. And so all this could end. So this can be seen as being lie and untrue by the people of the world. And devolving the power, political power, should not make you feel disheartened and discouraged. You should still have. So this is done with the. I'm doing this for the benefit of the long-term benefit of the Tibetan cause and the Tibetan exiles community, so that they can actually move forward. So we have actually become modernized society. So you should understand this. So I'm not discouraged or disheartened, and and I have not given up on the cause of Tibet. This is not at all true. I am a Tibetan, someone from the land of snows, and so each and every Tibetan has the responsibility over the Tibetan problem, Tibetan issue. So I'm a Tibetan from Amdo. So until my death, I have the responsibility over the Tibetan cause. So while I'm still healthy, if you Tibetans can take full responsibility over the Tibetan affairs, then when you face some problem, of course, I'm still here. I've not given up on you, and I'm not disheartened. So because of all these, we have followed a democratic system, and I'm asking you also to take full responsibility for this democratization, for advancing the democratic system of the Tibetan governance, administration, affairs. So you should all be Tibetans, or should not worry about. I just met a Chinese who said that he was here for about 10 or something years ago, and he also came back again. And people are very active, taking very active roles in the voting system of voting, and the democratic system in the Tibetan society has really made advancements, he said to me. And so my decision to devolve my power and is also for this, for further development and progress in our democratic system. So those of you who have come from Tibet, you can talk, you can tell this to people inside Tibet. Of course, this may be broadcast on the radio. So this decision that I'm making is made after giving thought to it for decades, for years and years. But on the other hand, the Garden Podong is the institution of the Dalai Lamas. So as long as I live, I need an institution. So this Garden Podong will still remain. But what is happening is that the Garden Podong is leaving out the political responsibility. And then for Tibetans, regarding the future incarnations, the next Dalai Lamas, 15, 16, 17, and so forth, will come if the Tibetans, mainly the Tibetans, and also the Trans-Himalayan regions and other people who follow Tibetan Buddhism, wants the Dalai Lama to continue, their incarnation to continue. So the Garden Potang will still be, remain intact. And so in the long, if you think about it, in the long term, then this change, that the decision I am making is has great benefits in the long run for the Tibetan. So what I'm asking to make changes in the Charter of the Tibetan Exiles is regarding the Garden Potang is to make changes to the effect that the Garden Potang is no more the government of Tibet, but Garden Potang is just the individual, the institution of the Dalai Lamas. But so the Tibetan word "shung" may not necessarily translate as government. So one journalist in India, in Delhi, one time said that Samdon Rinpoche is the Prime Minister of Tibetans, and then is the also he used the term Tibetan government. So I clarified to this journalist that we don't use these titles, Prime Minister or the government of Tibet in exile and so forth, but we call our administration the Central Tibetan Administration. So because we need to know the situation of Tibetans in exile, we need to help the Tibetans in exile. We need some organization, but we don't call this administration a government of exiled Tibetan government as such. So the change that I'm asking is to call the organization that looks after the Tibetans as the Central Tibetan Administration and not the Tibetan government in exile as such, and not the Garden Potang. So we are following a democratic system where people elect their leaders, and if this could also be emulated in Tibet, inside Tibet, whatever the case may be in the rest of China, if we could have this kind of system in Tibet itself, then we would be very helpful, good. So you should not worry about my devolving the responsibility, the political responsibility. This is what I wish to explain to you. And so, on the other hand, regarding Tibetan politics, when I was little, we had a regent who had the authority over the Tibetan governance, and then because of not being honest with the common people, at that time Tata Rinpoche was the regent, and at that time the one subject from the Pala estate, one of the aristocrats, Pala, there was a legal case against this subject of the Pala estate, and this common person, common man has come to Potala. So the legal proceeding was going on, and then the defendant was making his point, but then instead of listening to what he had to say, the regent was actually scolding him without listening to him. And then I felt that if we have no honesty in this kind of proceedings, then and then during that hearing in Potala, there was some kind of a hole on the roof of where this liquor proceeding was going on, and the sweepers in Potala used to listen through the walls, and then they were also peeping through the holes that were on this roof. And one of the sweepers called me, and I just creeped over there, and I sneaked in, and then I looked down, peeped down from the hole that was in the ceiling, on the side of the ceiling. And so, although